Welcome for the very first time to the 49-Yard Dash podcast, a podcast on your San Francisco 49ers, hosted by myself, Stephen Ellis, and joined now and weekly by my good friend and co-host, Josh LaFond. This is going to be an introductory episode, not an official one. We'll talk about ourselves to an extent, how we became 49ers fans, things of all that sort. But to begin, I must ask, Josh, how's it going, my man?
Well, Steve, always good to see you. Aside from being a high-octane war with some Scandinavian dwarfs, I'm doing pretty good.
No,
They're gunning
watch
for
your
me.
back out there, man.
They're gunning for me.
That's very true. As mentioned before, this episode is just going to be introducing ourselves and what exactly we're doing here. So I guess to begin, we can do just that, talk about ourselves to an extent. So Josh, you're from Michigan, and it seems odd a kid in Michigan ended up a 49ers fan. How did that happen?
Grew up in a household where people couldn't really decide on what teams they liked. Ironically enough, the only pro team we all cared for in Michigan was the Detroit Pistons. Not much of a hockey household either. Dad was a Steelers fan. Several of my other uncles and relatives and things, just bandwagon NFL fans. But actually, the first jersey I ever owned was a hand-me-down Steve Young youth medium Reebok jersey. Numbers were crusted, vinyl was faded. I was too chubby to fit into it. It was the first jersey I ever owned. I wore the heck out of it. And from that point forward, always been a diehard Niners fan. Obviously, being from Michigan, I am a Michigan Wolverines fan too. So now that we have Jim Harbaugh, of course, have an appreciation for him. The era that we enjoyed when he was in San Francisco, and all that. So, yep, kind of like a nomad, but grew up loving him and always will. What about you, Steve?
Yeah, I was born in Alabama, moved to Illinois for a little while, and then moved back here. I was only up there for about 6 years. But my dad is from California. He was born around the Sacramento area and then spent some time growing up close to Los Angeles, actually. But from the moment I was a little kid, they had me in Kobe and Shaq jerseys and Steve Young and Joe Montana, which, they aren't straight from the Bay Area specifically. So, yeah, I grew up 49ers, Lakers, Dodgers. Funny, actually, I was named after Steve Young, which you know that, but my dad, his favorite player was Joe Montana. He wanted to name me Joe, but my mom hated Joe.
Heck of a name.
So he settled for Steve, and then they settled on Steven, even though all my friends call me Steve pretty much. But so yeah, Steve Young is a part of my blood practically. But funny too, I have number 8 jersey back here, but I always wear number 8 anything that I do. We've played in basketball tournaments before, and on video games when I create my own player, it's always number 8 because I was born in August, the 8th month. When I was born, I was 8 pounds and 8 ounces. My favorite player growing up was Kobe, who wore number 8, and I was named after Steve Young, who wore number 8. So I felt like 8 was kind of just meant for me naturally. Steve Young I never didn't get to watch him live, but it was awesome. And I remember too, when you first moved down here, I was 11 or so, you were 12, 13. I remember playing Madden 12. And we created ourselves. You were quarterback, I was a receiver. And we would use the same team against each other. When I was on Madden 12, that was awesome.
No, that was probably the last decent game Madden 12 made. It's a shame that Peyton Hillis was on the cover. There's a lot of other better options, but hey, I digress. And that's really, though, you guys got to feel for us. That's really kind of if we had a mission statement, that's really what it is. We're diehard 49ers fans, always have been, and that's why we call the 49-Yard Dash what it is. It's a 49ers podcast for the fans, by the fans. We're going to bring you not only the insight to what we see on the field, what we read, what we hear, what we see on YouTube, what we see in the game, what we read throughout the week leading up to the game and even after that. But we're also going to be able to break it down the same way Steven and I would talk about it at work. We do work together. We talk about it just shooting the bull. We're going to bring that to you just the same way we would. We're going to throw guys under the bus if we have to. We're going to analyze it from an unbiased way as well.
Oh yeah, I mean it's true. I want I think both of us want this to be as if we were sitting in the truck chatting
Hmm.
amongst ourselves. And, our origin stories, they seem odd, but hey, that's who we are, man.
No doubt, no doubt. And I guess we
But
can get into it.
yeah,
You think about some of these guys too. Heck of a segue for our first episode, but watching these few preseason games, well, that's exactly what we're going to do right now. We'll talk about some stock up, stock down stuff on some of these guys that are on the roster bubble right now. For me personally, think about Trent Sherfield. Seems like
oh
he's
yeah,
really ascending right now. If Trey had a favorite weapon, that wasn't one of the big three, IU, Debo, or George Kittle, it'd probably be Sherfield, right? Definitely seems like he's got him a roster spot locked up. Stock down, definitely Jalen Hurd. I mean, I think we've been hearing about him since Madden 12. Get on the field.
it feels like it, man.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
It
Is
feels
at
like it.
Tennessee as a running back, goes to Baylor as like a scat back in the NFL as a wide receiver, 3rd-round pick, I believe. Can't get on the field.
Yeah.
Gonna always be a what if with him, but it really seems like it's got to be one of the times where the light bulb's got to come on for him. Who's some guys that you have, Steve?
Man, I got a couple, but I also wanted to just mention real quick too with Trent Sherfield. Here's how I'd put it. If somebody watched the preseason, the last 2 games, they didn't know anything about football or the 49ers,
Mm-hmm.
weren't familiar with any players, they would think that Trent Sherfield was their number one receiver, like he was the guy. He's
Mm-hmm.
been
Great
great
point.
so far. Oh yeah, no, he's been great so far. So he's definitely big time. He's locked on the roster, no doubt about it. Let's just see where he's at. But obviously he's not going to be top 2 in the
Yeah,
depth chart of
sure.
receivers. But hey man, he's been great. But stock up for me, Hasty, Michael Hasty. Man, I like the way he runs.
Oh yeah,
Really,
no doubt.
he's got an aggressive first step. I would describe it. I guess he cuts and he moves with some power. It looks like on that first step and really hits whatever gap is open. Man, I just like the aggressive manner in which he runs. Stock down, Nate Sudfeld. He's
Mm-hmm.
he's just how else do I put it? Let me think. Not very good.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, Steve.
Yeah, no,
Very articulate way of putting it.
yeah. No, it's and I actually had hope for. I'll openly admit it, I was wrong. I liked Josh Rosen coming out.
Same.
I was one of those guys. I'll admit it, I was wrong. So I was hoping that he would be perfect as a
Mm-hmm.
backup quarterback. But I got rid of him, and now is Josh Rosen really worse than this guy?
No, I know it's crazy to think about, and I
Yeah,
guess before I'd really like to talk about Sudfeld, but getting back to
yeah.
your comment about Hasty,
Mhm.
I do agree his stock is up. It does concern me a little bit. You look at Wayne Gallman, who personally not my favorite running back. I don't really see what he brings to the table aside from being just kind of an all-around back. I really like having the complementary backs. Like you got
Yeah,
Mostert and Sermon. They seem like they're going to be a heck of a 1-2 punch as long as Raheem's wanting to stay around. And then Hasty, obviously, bringing that, like you said, kind of hitting the hole and going,
mhm.
being just kind of just runs nasty.
Yeah,
It does worry me a little bit. He averaged like I think it was a little over 3.1 yards a carry on 19
okay.
carries on Sunday, getting the bulk of the load. But keep in mind too, thing that kind of brings me comfort, thinking he's still going to be number 3 running back on the roster too. A lot of those runs did come with the second team, did come with when Trey was in the game, whereas Gallman running with the first team a good bit, getting that first team O line. I think he averaged
Yeah,
close to 5 yards a carry, so definitely stock up on Hasty. And like you said with Sudfeld, people forget about it, being a Michigan homer. Josh Rosen actually was Jim Harbaugh's first recruit. People think of all the times he's slept over at kids' houses and stuff. Well, he did it with Josh Rosen, trying to get him to be the cornerstone of his first recruiting class. So same with you. I've
yeah.
wanted the best for Josh, whether he was in the maize and blue or not. And definitely when he was in San Francisco, thought he could
Mhm.
be a great number 2 guy. But like you said, with Sudfeld, how much worse really was Rosen. A lot of
Yeah.
concerning parts of Sudfeld's game, especially with the quarterback situation we got going on right now. Is Sudfeld really the insurance you want behind a potential franchise quarterback? I don't know, man. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I agree, but I guess As much controversy as the Jimmy versus Trey thing has brought, I guess it's good knowing that you feel that you have two good options. And
Yeah,
hopefully
very
you don't
true.
have to ever get to Sudfeld. But either way, his stock is down. He didn't look good. And as far as running backs, I would hope now, obviously Mostert is your one. Let's say
Mhm.
Sermon. I would like Hasty, Jeff Wilson. And I just haven't seen enough of Elijah Mitchell to really know yet.
I don't think we've seen any of Elijah Mitchell. I completely agree
No,
with you.
no,
I'd
yeah.
I'd love to see him as even in a kick returner role. Everything that
Yeah,
you watch some of his college tape.
yeah.
Didn't watch a ton of Louisiana Lafayette, but he can run in a straight line. He can run in a straight line fast. That's kind of what you want, at least out of a kick returner. Maybe as a complimentary back, but like you said, at this point, I don't know if I really want him over Jeff Wilson and Hasty. I like what those guys bring, and kind of talking about Wayne Gallman. He's a fine back. With a steady stable. Maybe he's your third back, but I don't think I'm taking him over the little X factor that Hasty and Wilson are bringing.
Yeah.
With 2 to 5 carries a game.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson's a touchdown machine,
Yeah.
man.
No, look at what he did when Mostert was out last year.
Yeah, yeah.
Don't know if I want to replace him with a guy who backing up Saquon Barkley couldn't really do anything. Obviously, that line's not great, but still don't know if that's really something we're looking for. Is just kind of an all-around generic back.
Yeah, Gallman's fine. I've seen Jeff Wilson have success, and Trey Sermon being a third
Yeah, there you
round
go.
pick. Obviously, I think he's going to be the second back. But
Oh,
even
for sure.
Hasty, just the fact when you include youth, that kind of, if it's close, give the young guy the nod. And same with Mitchell, really. Like we said, we haven't been able to see him. But I will say, even somebody like Matt Breida had success under
Hmm.
Shanahan. I mean, he can scheme it for all you have to do is be able to run fast, and he can scheme it. So it's just, man, they have a packed running back room, which I guess is a good problem to have.
No, you're completely right. You look at it. I can remember you and I having this conversation. Even in the Super Bowl year, when
Yeah,
Mostert went off, it was like, well, hey,
yeah,
maybe Matt Breida's the guy. Well, Lord,
yeah,
no, that
yeah,
wasn't it.
yeah.
And then you look at last year too, with all the injuries we faced and everything. Jeff Wilson stepping up. It's one of
Hmm.
those things where you and I have talked about ad nauseum and talking to the fans now. You guys are well aware. Kyle Shanahan is a mastermind, not only just in offense in general, but more specifically in the run game.
Hmm.
Seeing what he was able to do with a one-dimensional quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo, and we'll touch on that later. But having just a one-dimensional guy when teams loaded up the box in the playoffs in that Super Bowl run and just ran it down their throat. Raheem
Yep.
Mostert is a great running back and might be the fastest in the league, and that's great. But the reason he was able to go off like that, the reason Jeff Wilson was able to step into his shoes and do an outstanding job last year on short notice is because of the way that Kyle Shanahan draws it up. So if you can just
Absolutely.
have that one X factor, like you said, the way Wilson can go, that nastiness that Hasty's got, personally, I like that over what Wayne Gallman gives you because
Mhm.
obviously Trey Sermon, Mostert, they're going to get the bulk of the load. So let's let these guys who are going to get 3 to 5 carries a game. Let's let them just have something decisive that they can do when they get in the game.
Yeah, it's very true. But speaking of positional battles, there's one that you are kind of involved with as far as fandom goes, the cornerbacks. What do you think
Yeah.
about the cornerback battle thus far?
Well, you're right, involved with it. Being a diehard Michigan fan, um, as I mentioned at the outset, watched Ambry play in Detroit growing up in high school. Really thought, not gonna lie to you, it's something you and I have talked about off camera at nauseum. Really thought Ambry might even take the job for Mosley, is number 2 cornerback, day one. But he's a young guy. It might take some time to grow into that role, but definitely feel like it's going to be his down the line. Something about Ambry I'll mention. During his collegiate career, obviously the 2019 season, battled with colitis, lost a ton of weight, missed the first few games, came back. Really with the Thunder after losing 20 something pounds in the offseason, autoimmune disease really skinned down. And that's why he didn't play last year, in fact, because of COVID. Doctors advised him not to. So he missed out on his senior year. But talking about his play, not just his health issues. He arguably played more man press under Don Brown, Michigan's former defensive coordinator, who's since been fired and rehired. At Arizona, their DC under new head coach Jed Fish, which Bay Area fans will be familiar with. Jed Fish being from that area as well. Played more man press than anybody really in the country. Went up against guys like Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame, obviously number one receiver in Pittsburgh, it looks like, going forward. Went against guys that are going to be two of the first wide receivers taken in the first round of this next draft, and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. And really did a great job against those guys. When you're asked to get put out on an island as a man press guy, being kind of on the scrawnier side, but he's got excellent length, about that 5'11", 6-foot build, excellent athletic ability. Mentioned that he played, both sides of the ball in high school, played a little bit of kind of gimmicky stuff on offense in college too at Michigan. So definitely feel like his long-term potential is great. Right now, maybe not so much. Lenore, like what I've seen about him, or out of him rather, definitely a physical guy, kind of that got that dog mentality, right? Kind of has a nose for the ball. But you're more of a Pac-12 guy, Steve. I know being a USC fan, obviously you're more of the Lenore guy. How do you feel about him and maybe their future going forward? Maybe who can challenge Mosley and stuff?
As far as Lenore goes, I like, it's funny. Some of the issues that I thought Lenore would have really early on, I've actually seen Ambry have some issues with that. Ambry's been a little bit grabby, and I expected that from Lenore. One game I thought they were both fine. Lenore got the pick, but in reality, it was tipped and fell in his hands. That wasn't. Yeah. He was fine, and I thought Ambry was pretty good. I thought Ambry had a little better of a day actually in week 1, but then week 2, I thought Lenore had a little better of a day. I will say this: me and you talked about this off the air as far as Ambry. You talked about the health issues that he had and not being able to play for a while because of the COVID situation, and you talked about maybe he's still knocking off rust. And I will say, you mentioned OTAs and different practices and now preseason. I really don't think people can begin to knock off rust until you're in real game situation. Like practice, I don't consider, it's not the same thing. I don't think you can knock off rust at practice. You know what I mean? You're more comfortable there. Yeah, it's not the same thing. But no, I have high hopes for both of them. Really, I liked both picks. I was happy with both. I liked Lenore. And I didn't know quite as much about Ambry. You did, me and you've talked about them a lot. But I really do think both of them will end up being, I'm serviceable corners for sure.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And I'll mention this about Ambry too, kind of in harmony with your thought about knocking off rust. That and keep in mind, folks, I'm not the typical oblivious Michigan fan who thinks we're the greatest thanks in the sliced bread. I realize what a disappointment it's been. And in fact, that's what leads me to this comment. Perpetually in the off season, even, Ambry included, you hear all these raving reviews about Michigan's defense. And then Ohio State hangs 62. Ohio State, hangs high 50s on Michigan. The reason why you're going up against your own offense every day. The offense is going up against their own defense every day. The defense is more prepared for the offense. The offense can't seem to catch a break because who are they preparing for? Their own defense. They're not getting different looks like they would get in a typical game. And kind of the same thing with with Ambry. Just like you said, knocking off rust. Once he starts getting in the game, starts getting a feel for it. There's different podcasts and different guys we listen to. And one of them, Eric Crocker with Locked On 49ers, mentioned how when guys don't turn to look at the ball, it can be an indication that they might not be confident in their speed. Well, Ambry ran a 4.4 coming out of high school and ran that at Michigan too. So it's one of those things I don't really am concerned about his speed. I'm not concerned about his speed, rather. I think it's more so the fact he is grabby, the fact he is turning to look at the ball, maybe having a little confidence issues, probably more so related to like what you said, knocking off the rust. First time he's really going to have a full season in almost 2 years. But once he maybe knocks that off, I think we'll start seeing the kind of guy I expect to see out of him. Down the road going forward. Definitely a serviceable starting cornerback in the NFL is what I would look for with him.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this applies with both of them for different reasons. But I don't think we should panic with either one of them if they struggle early. Ambry being Needs to knock off some of that rust and get his rhythm back. Lenore being, because I think he's just a little more of a raw prospect. So with both of them, I don't think there's need for panic if they're not day one great outside cornerback starters, you know?
Completely agree. And let me ask you this about Lenore. It seems like folks go back and forth on this. Some think he might be the future behind K'Wan Williams. Others think he might. Maybe you took two outside corners with him and Ambry. Do you think Lenore translates better as a nickel? Do you think he's maybe more of an outside guy? What do you think?
You know, I actually think he would be a good nickel corner. I think he's got that physicality where the small, quick guys who are doing 5-yard ins and outs and slants. I think he would do well pressing against those guys. I really do. So I think he could become a good nickel corner, actually.
Yeah, and I think so too. If your biggest concern in your game, Lenore, is your top end speed, let's put you in a position to not have to use your top end speed.
Right?
Let's put you in a position where you can push and grab within the first couple of yards, get away with it, be physical, use the quick twitch, and keep those slants across the middle from getting caught, basically being able to really defend that stuff coming across the middle. And then in turn, you're putting both guys in a position to succeed. I think we agree on that. Definitely think Lenore could be a good slot corner if his time comes.
Yeah, no, I do too. You know, speaking of position battles, there's an elephant in the room, man. You know. Yeah, of course. You know, me and Josh are both Trey area fans, you know.
Trey Bay.
Oh yeah, all the way. No, it's an interesting battle. Trey Lance was labeled early as a raw prospect, which I always thought was exaggerated. There are certain qualities that are raw, but that's the case with any quarterback coming in. His accuracy, we saw. Who was he throwing to last week against San Diego? San Diego. The Chargers. Man, that's funny. Last week against the Chargers, who was he throwing to? Man, it was an out route, and he threw it low and behind him. I mean, it was way up. You know?
Should have been a pick. I remember the pass you're talking about.
And it was pretty rough. But then he comes back and throws a perfect slant the next play, and then ends up throwing that awesome touchdown to Travis Benjamin too. But it's a really interesting battle. What are your thoughts on it so far?
Yeah, you know, I don't really go back and forth on it. You know, coming out when we made the trade up to, and we being the 49ers, you know, when the 49ers made the trade up to number 3, honestly, I was thinking and hoping it might be for Zach Wilson. The Jets hadn't decided on who they were going to take. Me thinking, you know, hey, Justin Fields 2, we're going to get Zach Wilson 3. But the more we watched tape on it, the more you and I talked about it, really loved what we saw at a trade, you know, just coming out of college as a prospect. Granted, he didn't play last year, but that audition he had, while it wasn't just awesome, the fact that his team in the middle of the pandemic year, as people say at nauseum, got together for one game for basically an audition for this guy. They didn't have to play in that game. It was an exhibition game. But the fact that they did that for not only themselves, don't get me wrong, it was for them, but it was more so for Trey, to put Trey, firmly cement him in the first round. That really speaks to him as a leader, the kind of character he has. And you see it, you know, on Snapchat stories, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, from guys, you know, in the locker room, Debo, Ayuk, Kittle talking about Trey, kind of goofing off with them, you know, at camp and stuff. I really think his character is awesome. And as far as the battle goes, you know, where they're at right now, let's throw the rule book out here. Let's look at where these guys are at on paper. Jimmy's going into year 8, obviously. Trey's a rookie. Let's put that aside. The level of play they're giving you right now is pretty similar, right? Both of them had a couple, you know, some accuracy issues. But what does Trey give you? Trey's able to push the ball down the field, something I haven't seen from Jimmy. Not that Jimmy can't do it. He won't do it. We saw that little 10, 12-yard scramble Trey had for the first down against Los Angeles on Sunday.
Missed you up there. It's my bad.
Yeah. No, hey, it's all right. We all forget the irrelevant LA team. But when Trey made that scramble, it's something you wouldn't have seen Jimmy do. He might dance around in the pocket, but that's just you know, an extra layer that Trey gets. And I hope I'm explaining this well to you guys. But just the way I look at it is, okay, let's not look at the fact Trey's a rookie. Because the consensus is always you don't start the rookies, you got to sit for a year. We've seen it with guys like Mahomes too. They sat for a year. And in fact, Andy Reid said one of the biggest regrets he had was not starting Mahomes as a rookie. And then you got a seasoned guy like Jimmy in year 8. Jimmy's peaked out. Trey's at his level now. Let's start Trey now, and let's see where that rocket ship goes, because it's only going to go up. Jimmy's plateaued. It's not going up. It's going to go down at some point. We're going to go from a maybe slightly above average starting quarterback to subpar here before too long.
Yeah. No, yeah, I would prefer that they start him too, because for the same reason. I think it's interesting. We talk about, do they, as a team that wants to contend this year, do they want to risk the rookie mistakes? Jimmy Garoppolo makes rookie-like mistakes. He does. And I'm one that actually likes Jimmy a little bit more than some. I like him a little more than you even. But
that's for sure.
If they're both making rookie-like mistakes, why not go for the young guy who's got the crazy ceiling? Who knows, might explode this year. You know?
No, yeah, I completely agree with you. And just the simple fact of, okay, well, what Shanahan asks out of his quarterbacks is to deliver the ball in the place that he tells you to deliver it to.
Yeah.
You are the epitome of a game manager in a Shanahan offense. You are doing what Shanahan tells you to do. What Shanahan tried to tell Jimmy to do was push the ball down the field. Jimmy did not do that. What have we seen with Trey? An 80-yard bomb to Trent Sherfield on one of his first plays here a couple weeks ago. We saw Sunday night, almost said last night. We saw Sunday night here how he looked off the safety sitting in the box, looked him off and threw a dime to Travis Benjamin on a rope. If that thing was if it was anywhere else than where it was a pick by the safety, it was a pick by the corner covering him. It was perfect throw. That's not something we've seen Jimmy do. If Jimmy makes that throw, it might not have the strength to get there, or it might have the accuracy, the lack of accuracy to get there. So just the ability to take those shots and then to be accurate in those tight windows, I really like seeing that out of Trey. And then too, we talked about the run game earlier. All that's going to do is just open it up. Think about that playoff run in the Super Bowl year. How many teams stacked the box and how we still ran it at will, right? With the quarterback who, although was an ass to throw when he wasn't down the field, certainly. So now it's a similar analogy to what you and I have talked about. Think about how Stephen Curry in the NBA, when he comes up the 3-point line, they're not just guarding him at the 3-point line. They're guarding him 5 feet off at the 3-point line. Yeah. Having a quarterback can push the ball downfield, those linebackers, those safeties, they can't crawl up to the line. Yeah, they can't. They can't crawl up in the box. Can't get close to the line like they would with Jimmy. They can't stack that because you're gonna have to respect the fact that Trey can throw it deep and is very comfortable doing so. So all that does is just open up the rest of the offense, in my opinion.
It opened him, his arm strength and his athleticism opens up 2 different avenues of the game that Jimmy Garoppolo just doesn't have. It's true. And, I was high on Trey Lance from the very beginning. He was my guy actually the whole time. Maybe one day I'll share it, but I made my own personal quarterback grades where I broke down different facets of what I value out of a quarterback and ranked them. Maybe I'll share that one day, but we'll get further into all this stuff. And like we said, this is just an introductory episode mainly. We had to get into the 49ers to some extent, of course. They're the topic here, not us. But we just want to know, I wanted to let you guys know who we were and what the show is going to be about. But we'll all dive deep into that, and we'll do our best to cover your San Francisco 49ers as fans to the fans. But Josh, I think it's about time we probably wrap this thing up. But what you think? What do you got for me? The fact of the day, fact of the week.
So little fact of the week. I found this certainly interesting, considering I was quite the chunky monkey as a kid. The average bolt of lightning contains enough energy to toast 100,000 pieces of bread. I probably ate something similar to that over my childhood, over a span of time, more than most adults have ate in their life. I've ate more loaves of cinnamon raisin bread than many, have imagined. So the fact of a bolt of lightning could toast this amount was certainly quite interesting to me, Stephen.
That's a pretty good one. I misspoke there. I said fact of the day instead of fact of the week. This is a weekly podcast. I mentioned at the outset that Josh would be joining me every week, and that is the case. We'll be doing this once a week, and we'll have another episode out before the first game of the regular season against Detroit. But hey, we're looking forward to it. we're both diehard fans, so give us a shot.
We'll see
Thanks,
you guys
everybody.
then.
Yeah. See you next week, guys.